boys and girls? It's Doug Childs, and it's Warriors Rich
and Wildmen. What's happening, Doug?
Hey, I'll tell you what's happening. Let me find it. Hold on. Richard. Boom! Look at that, baby. Would Jesus vote for Trump?
A little lower.
Little lower?
Go back.
Okay, can you see that?
Right there, yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I was showing it to the other camera. But right there, buddy. Would Jesus vote for Trump? See God fist bumping DJT. I'm talking number 45L Presidente. It's out. It's available on Amazon. We just got Kindle approved, waiting for the audiobook to be approved. The audiobook's a freaking riot, man. Look how fat this thing is, man.
That's a lot of information.
416 pager. And everybody's like, why is it so big? And I'm like, well, it's a complicated mess. And we wanted to make sure that we were very thorough in our reportage of running Trump's person and policies through the sieve of the gospel. And I think it's a standaloner, man. I mean, there's been books out there about Trump and the prophetic aspect of him being a president, and you know, very popular stuff. Other people, other Christians have written detracting books about Trump and his character and why we shouldn't vote for him as believers. This thing, man, we ran it through, like I said, the sieve of the gospel, every policy, his personality, his crassness, his enemies, which we're going to talk about today. And I think, you know, I could be wrong. I think he squares pretty severely with biblical authority, you know, as a fallen person, as somebody who's not perfect. Jesus is the only perfect person to ever schlep this pebble. But I'm telling you what, man, it's tight, and this is an apologetic for not being apologetic as a believer for supporting President Trump. Heretofore, if he does something kooky, you know, we'll confront that. We'll write about it.
Yep.
But I think heretofore, man, from a biblical standpoint, I think his governance is pretty scriptural.
Yep.
Thank you, Rich, for that underwhelming response, buddy.
I was just listening to you, man. I didn't know you were done. I literally was just listening to what you were saying.
Well, I need a bologna sandwich.
That was me nodding in agreement right there. If they're listening to the podcast, they didn't see me nodding, but I was nodding, not off, nodding in agreement.
Right. Oh, I'm nodding like an off. All right, so let's dig into some of this, man, and let's talk about Jesus and Trump and what their enemies. Warriors and Wildmen listeners.
Wait, you mean, Doug, can I interrupt you?
Yes, please.
Jesus had enemies?
Yes, he did.
Wait a minute. I thought Christians were everybody's supposed to love him and they're supposed to be the best. Jesus had enemies. Wait, you mean he wasn't killed by his besties?
Well, you see, I think it says in Hosea that he got wounded in the house of his quote unquote friends.
Whoa.
And I believe that's Hosea 13. I could be wrong. I'm not losing my mind, just my memory. I need some Prevagen, damn it.
Yeah, and so the closer you are to God and his will, the more enemies you're going to have. That's Bible right there. Jesus said, hey, he said, they hate you. Just remember, they hated me first. So the more that you're like him, the more that you think like him, the more you take the side of the gospel and the side of Jesus, the more enemies you're going to have. So just thought I'd throw that out there real quick.
No, and that's the verse that we open this chapter with is John 15. As a matter of fact, Jesus said that if everybody really likes you and everybody's speaking well of you, then you know what? There's something definitely wrong for you. I'm doing a painting of Churchill. I don't know if you can see it through your camera, but it'll be on the podcast finished product of Churchill wailing on a cigar, holding a machine gun, and I don't know if I'm going to paint it on the Churchill painting or just make it part of the title. And it's the famous Churchill quote where he says, "You've got enemies? Good. That meant that you stood for something at some time." You know,
that's good.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, people, to have enemies. And like Jesus said, if you ain't got none, man, then you are on a wrong footing. Said Jesus Christo.
I like this verse. I was reading it one time when I was a young pastor, and you know how sometimes you read a verse and you think, I don't remember having seen this before, or having read this before, or heard about it. I think it just caught me off guard, and I was going through a lot of trouble with a lot of enemies, and I read this, and it said, "If the world hates you." I was like, yeah, Jesus? He says, you know it hated me first. I was like, I'm pretty sure that doesn't help me feel any better, but it's a good thought. And that's the basis or the premise of this chapter is that the world is going to hate anyone who, not just Jesus, not just Christians, but people who take that worldview or side with the ideas or principles of heaven.
Yeah, and Jesus was an immediate threat to three particular entities, and we always tell our kids this stuff that you can tell a lot about a person by the company they keep.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You hanging out with them bad seed, them hippies. Well, then that means you're a hippie. My parents used to tell me that all the time. But I didn't have the hippie haircut. I flew incognito, Rich. Had all their weed, did all their dastardly deeds, but I didn't get the hippie cut. Didn't like it. Was more of a punk rock guy. But you can tell a lot about people, about who they're buddies with, the company they keep, and you can also tell a lot about people by the enemies that they attract. And that's what I think is so interesting about who attacked and who is attacking Donald Trump. But let's talk about Christ's enemies first, just to get on a clear footing. Who are the ones that he ticked off many moons ago when he was schlepping the mean streets of the Middle East. I think one of the most incredible things, before Jesus did anything, Rich, when he's just cooing and pooing in his diapers and he's breastfeeding off Mary's mammaries, is Herod, when he's just a little kid. King Herod decides that he's going to try to off this kid, and it's because he heard this thing, going around through the city, through Judah and Jerusalem, that there was a kid born in the stable who everybody's calling King of the Jews.
Yeah.
And from a political standpoint, this kid reveled that manic, crazy, paranoid leader's existence. So politically, Christ was a big threat to the political leader Herod at that time.
Yeah, he was worried. He was worried. I mean, when the people start talking about, he's a political leader, and the people start talking about, we had a vision, and there was a prophecy, and now they said it's coming true, and our king is rising up. He's not thinking, hey, I have a problem with your religion. He has a problem with your politics. This is somebody that could be a rival for my throne.
Yeah, and for those who aren't hip to Herod and hadn't really studied the Bible, he was a king, obviously, in the first century. He connived long and hard, man, for his position. And so his supremacy was on thin ice with this Christ kid around, and he kissed way too much Roman backside to let some Galilean grab his gavel. He was power hungry. He threatened a baby birthed into the prophetic purposes of God. And he's the consummate, again, just think of the milieu today in comparison to the first century. Herod was the consummate, jealous, power-hungry politician who would stop at nothing to preserve his power. And it's kind of like the envious, soulless, and specious political swamp critters on the left and the right who've made a very comfortable living off the average American taxpayers during their near-eternal feckless stint behind the Beltway.
Yep. And so you see that he not only was worried about that he was going to come and take his power, he decided that he was going to do something wicked to try to kill him before he was even, maybe just walking.
Yeah.
So let's start killing babies. That sounds familiar. I heard of that.
When you're talking about politicians, and how they rank, lower than televangelists and used car salesmen, there's a reason, that they've earned that bad reputation, because these guys are not in it most part, and I'm including the GOP in this malediction. Most of them are in it for power, for prestige. They're not in it to represent we the people.
And money.
They're in it for, they're in it for the cash. They're in it for control, luxury condos, hookers, mega money from special interest groups, CNN gigs, all that stuff. And when Christ rocks up onto the scene, he immediately, just from a titular standpoint, just the title that's going around, the King of the Jews has been born, is already threatening him. And like you said, he hadn't done jack squat, man. This is a little baby. But the evil demons that are working in, the principalities that are working in political people, man, they can smell a threat to their positions, to their power, and to their pocketbook, and they go after them, man.
Yep.
So number two, the religious hoity-toities of his day hated him, and one of the most obvious things to anybody just given the scripture a cursory glance is, I mean, you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Nearly every chapter, man, Jesus is going after the religious leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, well, these guys are crazy because they're all talk. And then all of a sudden somebody comes up and is doing something for the people and cares about the people. There's a difference between people that are talking and people that are doing. And the religious leaders, one of the problems with the religious leaders is they were sucking up to the politicians. I know that doesn't sound familiar to today at all, right? But the religious leaders were sucking up to the politicians, and they were all buddies. And the funny thing is, they were actually the ones who were against the kingdom of God. They actually were supposed to be representing God, but what were they doing? They were opposing God in the flesh right there on the earth. And the Bible says, you didn't recognize the day of your visitation. It's like, we're here getting ready for God. I'm here, guys. We're going to kill you. It's right. Like, I'm pretty sure. I heard a guy say this. He said, he was preaching, and he said, you know what? The Lord just showed up in this place. And some of you are looking at your watches because you're wondering what time the football game starts and when we're going to get out of here. He said, but the reason that he showed up and you didn't recognize him is because you don't know him. And that's how they were, because they were not representing God. They did not know God. And so what were they doing? They were playing political games. They were hand in hand with the politicians. So when Jesus came up, he didn't only represent a threat to the politicians' power, he represented a threat to the power and prestige of the people in the ministry that were doing it for the same reason as the politicians. Apparently. Then, not now, right? It's different now.
Yeah, and the first century religious leaders like Herod, they worked long and hard, man, for their power and prestige. They too, just like Herod, kissed a lot of Roman ass, brother. And they weren't about to let this 30-year-old rebel from Galilee threaten their security, their wallet, and their vaunted place as religious control freaks, Rich, of us po sinners. And that's why they hated Jesus. That's exactly why, because he was completely obtuse and contrarian to that crap.
Well, think how he one of the ways that he represented a problem to their system, and it reminds me also of Trump too, but you think about this. You think about Jesus was 30 years old when he started his ministry. He was a carpenter, right? He was not a rabbi in the traditional sense. He was not, when he was at the temple, chosen to be the disciple of a rabbi. So he probably was not chosen from the time he was 12 or 13 years old and went to go learn the trade of his father. And so he wasn't even chosen as one of the best rabbis, which is insane. So he's a guy that comes from outside their system. So you have these guys with their system of, we will tell you who's holy. We will tell you who has authority. And then Jesus comes from being a carpenter and says, let me show you guys some real authority. And then it blew everybody's mind, because if this guy can come from over here at Joseph's house and start preaching with authority that's different than any teaching we've ever heard from you, now it's threatening their power, right? Because he didn't come from their system. He didn't come from their system.
Yeah. So and now, you know, it's and you inject one person, like you said, like Jesus, into that mix, and OMG, man, their little house of cards starts to unravel real quick. Another thing about the reason they hated Jesus is that he wasn't two-faced, and they were.
Yep.
And
Jesus didn't flip-flop.
He didn't flip-flop. He also, Christ cared about the common man. And you know what? They didn't give a hootie patootie about the unwashed. And that, again, you see a big separation. They're into kissing backside, how shall I put it, on the left coast and up in New York City and over there on the Potomac. And Jesus is looking at the flyover states, the commoners, and he's giving them a whole lot of love. As
you mean
Led
the regular
Zeppelin would
people
say.
out there in those regular states, Doug, that are growing food and making things? You know those
the
people
deplorables.
that are important to nobody? Yeah it's like those people don't matter. They're nobodies. They're just, and you know what? The only time they care about those people is for elections and votes. They never care about those people, you know, their everyday life, like you said. But Jesus cared about every person. Jesus went to the broken, the busted, and disgusted. If you find them, you find Jesus.
You see Jesus, he's loving religious titles, or the religious or loving titles, and Jesus is just loving the Father, man.
Yep.
And there's multifaceted reasons why they they definitely oppose the Son of God, but three entities in particular: politicians,
Yep.
religious leaders, and then of course El Diablo. Man, he
Yep.
wasn't thrilled with Jesus's glide path,
No.
and tried to take him down at every turn of event.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to President Trump. Now, granted, I mean, you'll agree with me, Rich, that Trump is no Jesus, right?
Yeah, I'm not trying to sign up and say that Trump is Jesus or he's anything like Jesus, but he does represent the things that we support as Christians, that the Bible supports. He is a guy who supports what we believe. And he says he's a Christian. I don't have a reason to doubt it. But I'll tell you this, Doug, we are not saying that Trump is the second coming of Jesus. We're in agreement on that, right?
He doesn't even look like him, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
he doesn't have the Ted Nugent haircut.
Right.
He doesn't wear a robe and sandals. Matter of fact, as an artist, I think in pictures, I don't want to see Trump in a robe and a pair of sandals. Do you?
Correct. No, I don't.
Yeah. So
But
we're
I'm not
we're
gonna
not
worship
like
Trump. Are you going to worship Trump?
No, man.
I'm not
and I'm
bowing
telling
down
you,
to Trump.
And Rich, I'm telling you right now, buddy, is that if Trump goes rogue, if he starts tossing, you know, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights,
I'm done with him.
Declaration of I'll use the force of Clash Daily. We'll talk about it on the podcast to wreck his glide path. Again, heretofore, he's done a great job,
Right.
and I'm not going to sit there with the rest of the Never Trumpkins and try to pull out some of his foibles from his past or some of his present tweets that seem so offensive and throw him under the bus, because from a Judeo-Christian standpoint, from a constitutional originalist standpoint, nobody has done what Trump has done, and especially in this day of declension, where Obama sunk, you know, our blessed United States of America through his 8 years of tyranny, man. So, you know, what's weird about...
We're also not vouching for his future. We're not, just like you said, we're not saying that everything's going to be perfect. He's going to be perfect. He's going to do all the right things. We're saying, as of now, Trump has supported biblical worldview, biblical policies, and like you said, the originalists, the constitutionalists. He's done that. And so, and not like any politician I've ever seen in my lifetime. So I've never seen anyone that's like that, that's doing what Trump is doing. And so again, we're not saying that everything he's going to do is perfect. And if he does something that's messed up, obviously we would be against that. But up to now.
Up to now, he's doing a great job, and he's pretty much the shiznay from a conservative libertarian standpoint, being very friendly. And again, people, the Warrior and Wildmen listener, you need to remember how unfriendly Obama was to Christianity, to your faith. He vilified us at every juncture. He tried to scrub Christianity, Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule from our culture, and we did a whole podcast on how he fast forwarded just ridiculous secularist junk that has nothing to do with fairness and equality, especially for those who have a Judeo-Christian worldview.
Right.
You know, what's funny about Trump, Rich, and I've got it in the book, which is Would Jesus Vote for Trump, is that for years, man, not everybody loved Trump, but I'm telling you what, Hollywood dug him. 2004 to 2015, The Apprentice was kicking ass. Everybody wanted to be on that. Everybody praised Donald. Everybody needed Donald. Everybody loved Donald. Every toady me monkey truckled with oodles and oodles of flattery for Donald until June 16th, 2015, when he said, you know what, Hollywood, you know what, DC, all you people have completely decimated our nation. It's time for these lame-ass politicians and Hollywood dorks to stop driving this nation into a debt-addled, ignoble ditch that it's beholden to foreign powers and taking its cue from the UN. That day's over. And boom, here comes a concentration of hate.
You know what's crazy? I didn't know that on that day, that when Trump said those words, that he was running for president of the United States, that it was in that moment that he received the spirit of racism.
Yeah.
But it just came from the supernatural. It dropped out of the fourth dimension.
Bam.
It had never existed in this world, in this realm. And on that moment, the portals have opened up, and the The spirit of hell came down, and he received a spirit of racism on the day that he announced that. According to the Democratic Party, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, forget all the awards that he's given to black people. Forget the fact that he's promoted both black, female, Hispanic people to powerful places within his organization. Forget all that stuff that he's done, because
forget the pictures of him receiving awards with Rosa Parks and Muhammad Ali. Those weren't real. That was a publicity stunt because he thought one day I might run for president, right? That makes no sense.
Yeah. No, so they cranked up the Trump hatred machine. You see it on CNN on a nightly basis, which they've become a complete, predictable, boring joke of Trump derangement syndrome. You see it in college campuses. You see Trump being called a Nazi. That term's being thrown around like a drunken midget at a Molly Hatchet concert. And you're sitting there looking at this sad, sad thing that's happening in our culture, and you just got to deduce. And it's impacting Christians.
Yeah,
I know a lot of Christians, man, that will say, well, I'm not for Trump. It's like, why? Tell me why. Well, his tweets. His tweets are mean. I got a whole chapter in what Jesus Vote for Trump about, is Trump's crassness biblical, and that chapter is a frickin' hoot, man. But you look at who hates. So we opened this thing up with, like, you can tell a lot about people, Rich, by the company you keep. We open it up with a little an addition to that maxim, which is you can also tell a lot about people by the enemies they attract. So who's been attacking? Let's touch on this first. Look who right out of the gate, after Trump was after the inauguration, right out of the gate, guess who decided they're going to attack Trump?
Who?
Witches. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, because I went to public school and stuff. But if witches are against you, generally and historically speaking, that means you're kind of doing something right?
Yeah, you must have an agenda that's different than theirs, right? Because they don't attack people on their team. I think Jesus, it was Jesus. He said, if a kingdom is divided, it can't stand. He said that. So why would the witches attack Trump if he's on their team, if he's of the devil?
Yeah, that's weird to me, man. Because if Satan, or if Trump is this satanic, dictator that everybody's purporting him to be, then why is the witch community, again, that imbibes deeply in black magic and earth worship and all kinds of other hoodoo voodoo, why do they hate him? They should they should embrace satanic Donald, if he is that, with this thing that Journey's saying about, Rich, open arms.
Hey, I don't remember reading anything about any witches trying to stop Obama.
Yeah, there would. I wonder why, you judgmental racist.
Hey, do not get off on this side trail that I'm going to offer right now. Just acknowledge it and move on.
Do it.
Yesterday, because I know we could get off on this. Yesterday, I saw an article that a poll was taken that Michelle Obama is the most admired woman in the world. I put one comment on Fox 10 News when they put that article, and I said, the world has lost their mind. That was my total comment.
Yeah.
All right, back to our original trail. So the witches, they didn't have a problem with Obama. But
so let me
read about that convention. It blows my mind.
Okay, so if people think we're full of crap, it's a BBC article titled "Witches Cast Mass Spell Against Donald Trump," and that's 25 February 2017. Again, it's a British broadcasting company, BBC. The title is, if you want to Google it to see if we're lying, again, is "Witches Cast Mass Spell Against Trump." And so, at the stroke of midnight on Friday, followers of witchcraft across the U.S. performed a mass spell designed to stop the president from doing harm. Now, let me stop right there and yap a little bit about that. Everybody's like, ooh, the witches are against you. Ooh, the devil's against you. Ooh, demons are against you. Doesn't look like they have that much power, man, because Trump's been kicking ass for about 2.5 years.
Maybe their spell worked. You know why? They wanted to stop Trump from doing harm.
Yeah, so
he hadn't been doing harm to us. Maybe the spell works. Oh, to them and their agenda. Okay, my bad. I misunderstood.
Yes. And what's interesting to those who are into casting spells and pronouncing curses, even you Christians who do that kind of crap,
Oh, they do.
With your gossipy slander, mean tongue.
Shoot.
It says in Psalm 109 that when you curse somebody, that thing takes wings and it comes back to your house. So
Hey.
FYI, going forward with your your curses against people and pastors. But I digress. So a spell to bind Donald Trump, Rich,
Bind him.
and all those who abet him, you and I, in a Facebook group devoted. Isn't it interesting how Facebook allows these kind of groups who pronounce curses on the president, and they do the hoodoo voodoo and roll dice and cut off chicken legs and do witch's brew or whatever they do. They let it ride, gets 10,500 likes, and they coined the hashtag magic resistance. Now, I don't know who could have inspired a curse against President Trump. Who do you think it was? Maybe Satan?
Probably the devil. I'm going to go with that.
Okay, so am I on good ground, man? If witches and warlocks don't like you, they don't like Trump, and they're tossing tarot cards, lighting candles, praying to Satan, and breaking their damn Ouija board over your public policies, then you can probably deduce from that you're close to that which is holy, just, and good.
Yep.
Am I groping there, Rich?
Nope, I think that's it, man. If the devil's trying to stop you, look, the devil doesn't try to oppose those that are walking the same way as him. That don't even make any sense. He only gets in your face and gets together all the witches and warlocks, which I'm sure they love to call each other that.
Crazy.
He just gets those people together to get all whooped up and work their black magic. But then, like I said, they didn't do it to Obama. They did it to Trump. So obviously, if the devil's against you, the devil doesn't want you to do what you're doing. So Christians, get your heads out of your Christians.
Yeah.
Christians.
Christians don't be cranially posterialized. I think that's what Rich is trying to say.
What I'm trying to say is that Christians are trying to make me use unchristian language right now to describe you when you act like the devil. Try not to oppose someone that's protecting freedom of speech and religion in our country. And then talk about how he went to a prostitute. You know what? Let me get a hold of your web browser for a minute. You porn-watching, lying, weed-smoking dogs. You guys are so full of crap, bunch of hypocritical. You know what? They combined the devil and the Pharisees in one shot. I'll slap the taste out of their mouth, Doug. I got a marijuana card. I smoke some weed and go to church and go home and watch some porn and talk about how Donald Trump doesn't care about me.
Brother, that whole rant should be a hashtag somewhere. And here's a challenge for the Warriors and Wildmen listener. Next time some numbnut, Christian, non-Christian, whatever, you're at some soiree, backyard barbecue, Labor Day's coming up, whatever, and you get some dipstick who talks about how evil Trump is, bring up the facts like, well, how come if he's so evil that witches who worship Satan, who worship nature, how come they hate him? How come Satanists hate Trump? How come communists hate Trump?
Yep.
How come socialists hate Trump? What about Venezuelan dictators or Antifa or abortion advocates or the DNC who booed God during their 2012 convention?
Come on.
And Google that if you think I'm lying. Enjoy. Why does Mr. Compromise, I'm talking Rich, Mitt Romney, why does he hate Trump?
A joke.
Why do man-haters
Because he's
hate
the devil
Trump?
too. Hey, I'll tell you
exactly.
what. When Christians
look
are going,
at the list.
Trump is evil, you need to pull up on your phone a picture of an aborted fetus and say, Trump hates this. Tell me where you stand on it. And then you're going to know in 1 second if they're on God's side or not. And I don't care if they call themselves Christians. Again, we go to the abortion thing. Donald Trump is the most outspoken person, pro-life president ever in the history of our country. And I don't want to hear any more Christians talking about how they support baby killers because it's a choice. You have a choice to go to hell too. Get on with it and try to do it quieter and try to take the Christian stickers off your car because I'm going to run you over with my big red truck. That's where I'm at with that. I'm going to honk my train horn, make sure everybody sees it, gets a video.
Hey, Rich, you know who else hates Trump?
I'm mad.
I can feel it, brother. And Martin Luther said that he did his best work while he was angry. You know who else hates Donald Trump? People who think it's okay for adult men to pee next to little girls in public bathrooms.
Yep.
That's who hates Trump. They hate him.
Yep. I like
folks,
that meme, Doug. It has this guy, and he comes in and says, "What are you doing in the women's bathroom with my daughter?" And you're peeing, and this big guy standing there, and he says, "Well, I identify as a woman." And the next picture, it's a cartoon, is the guy slamming the guy through the stall, and he goes, "Sorry, I identify as an MMA fighter." Because you ain't going in there with my daughter. That's what's up. But we have taken deviancy and complete ludicrous behavior, thoughts, lack of principles, all of these things, and we've tried to normalize them. And then a guy who comes in and goes, "Guys, that doesn't even make sense." Now he's the devil.
Yeah.
Now he's the bad guy. And the Bible says in the last days, they're going to call evil good and good evil. And now we have witches cursing Trump. And then everybody's saying, yeah, Trump is evil. Even the witches know. It's like, you're on the wrong team, dummy. And religious people are agreeing with the witches.
And again, for those who have short-term memory problems, Satanists hate Trump, communists hate Trump, socialists hate Trump,
lesbian
dictators,
soccer captains hate Trump.
No, and it's
I'm not
only
going
that.
to the White House. Okay,
I don't care.
So what?
Right.
Yeah.
Now check this out. Who else hates Trump? Those who hate masculinity. We talk about it all the time, man. Men are made to be providers, protectors, hunters, and heroes. And from our point of view, that's under Christ's governance. And people who despise masculinity, think it toxic, they hate Trump. Are you with them? Huh? Warriors and Wildmen listener, is your family siding with that? Because that group of people, they loathe Trump. And you know the reason why? Because he exhibits testicular fortitude against these groups that are tearing America apart like a blouse marked down to 99 cents at a Walmart's Assistant Manager's Day sale. That's why.
Hey, check this out. If your family is against masculinity and they think Trump is just too much and all that, there's a little coffee shop in Cave Creek. You can go down there, and right by the register, they have a little bag of assorted nuts, and it's called Sack of Nuts. You could take the supposed men in your family down there and get them a sack of nuts. And then once they get a sack of nuts, they can go outside and enjoy that little treat. And then you can explain to them why being a man is biblical and a man acting like a woman is not biblical. And they hate Trump because he's traditionally masculine. He's not just a man, Doug. He's the man. And people don't like that. You know why they don't like it? Because they're not. They're jealous. People are so jealous, it's pathetic. Like, Trump is rich. He's tall. He's powerful. He doesn't put up with crap from anyone. He has a gorgeous wife. You know what? You envious little toads out there, you jealous little crybaby turd bags. I can't. You know what? I went somewhere with my wife yesterday, and somebody asked me, she walked into the restroom, and this guy said, "Is she blind or what? Because she's married to me." I said, "She's not blind." I said, "I'm rich." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Well, I don't have any money, but my name's Rich anyway. It counts just as much, so whatever." That's real life, Doug. And you know what? I believe that people are envious of Donald Trump.
Oh, hell yeah.
They are. They're jealous because they're poor.
Except for people who aspire to the American dream, who think if you bust your ass, you get this thing called favor.
Yep.
And if you work hard and work well, then boom, life rewards you back. And if you fall down, you get back up. I mean, he went through bankruptcies. Yep. He went through problems. He went through scandals. And, like Churchill said, is that success is going from one failure to the next without loss of enthusiasm. Yes. And, well, look at let me get a couple more in here. Yeah. Let me know what you think of this. Jussie Smollett and Colin Kaepernick, and people who hate ICE and the cops hate Trump.
Boom.
Hello, folks.
Yep.
Anti-military people hate Trump.
Yeah, because they're anti-America.
Yeah.
You know what?
George W. Bush hates Trump.
Well, that's because he's a politician. He's a team player. Hey, check this out.
Exactly.
I was watching, and I always precede this story with this statement. I am not a Floyd Mayweather fan in boxing. I acknowledge that he's probably the greatest defensive boxer, one of the greatest for sure. But I don't like counter-strikers. I don't like people that run. Anyway, Floyd Mayweather was on an interview and on this radio show, but they had video of it, but on the radio show, and they asked him what he thought about Trump. And he said, "You know what? Trump was never a racist till he ran for president. And these are obviously all black people on this radio show. That's why they're asking. And they were kind of upset. And the lady said, yeah, but he hasn't done anything to help anybody else. And he said, hey, let me tell you this. You need to stop worrying about who the president is, and you need to get out there and hustle. Whatever your idea is, you need to get out there and work. Work your idea. Stop worrying about that. It doesn't matter to me who's in the White House. I'm going to work. And she says this, yeah, but you're blessed. And Floyd Mayweather took her to task. You can look the interview up. It's incredible. He starts laying into her. He said, what are you talking about blessed? I grew up in an apartment with a whole family in one room, not one bedroom, one room. My father was in prison. He said, no one gave me anything. I've worked for and earned every single thing that I have. Doug, in his last fight, he just went over $1 billion in fight earnings. But he also became his own promoter, changed boxing forever. He is ridiculously rich and wealthy. And in his training, Doug, he says something. He says, hard work, and his whole team shouts back, dedication. That's the American dream. And you know what? Floyd Mayweather doesn't have a problem with Trump. You want to know why? Because he knows he's the man. You want to know why he knows that? Because he's the man. Because no one gave Floyd Mayweather anything. Nothing. And he supports Trump because he's like, hey, what's the problem? You know, he earned it. He's where he's at. And I think that's funny because we have other people, like you said, Jussie Smollett, people like that are against Trump and because he's this and that. But it's because you're a bunch of pansies. That's why. It's because you're weak.
You know who else hates the Donald? Miley Virus.
Oh.
Miley Virus. She hates Donald Trump.
Who cares?
Madonna hates Donald Trump.
She's not even American. Is she American? Or did she become an American? Because we ought to send her back. I heard somebody say that recently. Let's start sending some people back.
Hey, you know, it's funny. Everybody's like, Trump's a racist for saying he's going to send, Omar or Tlaib back to where they came from. We just posted on ClashDaily.com Tlaib's and Omar's old tweets when they said of their opponents that, why don't you pick your stuff up and go back to where you came from.
Yep.
Matter of fact, Tlaib said of Donald Trump when he was running for president in 2015, we should deport him. Now, here's a little question in the quadruple. Here's a little question for the quadruple standard leftists: is what they said racism? Is that bigotry? Is that a mean, evil thing to say?
No, they can't be racist, Doug, because they're not white.
Yeah, and again. If it weren't for quadruple standards, Rich, the left would have no standards at all. But I digress. Let's wrap this thing up, man.
Let's do it.
A lot of these clowns, Rich, have zero problems with the like of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, Hugo Chavez, frickin' Osama bin Laden. We shouldn't be messing with him. They have no problems with our borders being wide open to MS-13 thugs or ISIS.
Did you know you can go to a bar and order the bin Laden?
No, what is it?
It's 2 shots with a splash of water. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes,
sorry.
I love it. So in summation, my brothers and my sisters, my Warriors and Wildmen listeners that Rich and I love to titillate with interesting podcasts, Trump's doing to his enemies, both politically, religiously, and diabolically, the witches and warlocks, what Jesus did to his first century opposition.
Yep.
Here's what he's doing. He is eradicating their credibility and their careers. It's the exact same thing that Jesus did. He crushed their control, their authority, their precious cash with his pro-America, very Bible-friendly policies. And that, my friends, I don't care what you say, is why they hate him. Rich, final thought, buddy.
Final thought is this. You don't want to be on the side of the devil. If you're a Christian, I'm just talking to the Christians right now. You don't want to be on the side of the devil. The witches and warlocks, they hate Trump. How can you stand there and stand against and preach against a guy who's the most Christian, conservative, pro-life president that we've ever had in the White House? That makes no sense to me. You know what? You need to probably consider, you need to spend some time with the Lord and really consider where you're coming from and why you're coming from there. Because you got some weird biases that are screwing up your doctrine. It's screwing up your preaching, screwing up your life. You're going to answer for that one day. Preachers, now I'm talking to preachers. Your pastor, if they're talking crap about Trump, they're going to answer for that one day. They're going to answer to the Lord. While they were speaking against, I'm going to say it, Doug, I'm going to make people mad. The Lord's anointed. Maybe not anointed to preach, but anointed for this season to lead in America and the world.
Absolutely, buddy. And again, I told you last word, but I got to let this, since we're talking to the pastors. Please remember, Samson dated hookers. Please remember that David committed adultery, married 7 women, conspired to murder Bathsheba's husband Uriah. What else? Abraham, he screwed his maid and lied about his wife. And who else did weird things of our patriarchs? Moses murdered a guy, had massive anger issues. Noah got drunk, fell down naked. I wonder, Pastor, if Trump did any of those things, would you be against him? Would you be against David, Abraham, Samson, Noah, and Moses? Huh? And like Rich said earlier in the podcast, I bet you don't even live up to the standards that you're putting on Trump. That's what
how
I'm
would your
guessing.
life measure up to the scrutiny that he's been under?
Yeah, let's put a camera on you 24/7 and see if you're Mr. or Mrs. Clean. All right, Rich, I'm finished, buddy. Now what?
Warriors and Wildmen, go there, sign up, subscribe, like us, love us, follow us, send us some money so we can push it out. Warriors and Wildmen.